There's the moon, which is going to be a lunar eclipse. So I thought it'd be cool to film it or time lapse it with the Tamron 35-150. All right, it's like -8 or -10, but it's pretty, if you can see back there. So we're gonna take a little walk with the Tamron 35-150 and see how long we can last taking some photos with this this lens. So this is a great spot to take pictures. It's a included trail race, except for then when it's like, you know, 15 below zero or whatever it is right now. But it is a beautiful spot to take pictures, and a great spot to test this lens. Probably not gonna stay here too long, just because it's really cold. But yeah, I got the sun hitting the mountain back here, which always makes for a really spectacular, super contrasty, dynamic scene. So we'll snap a couple of those photos and then try. And just for disclosure, Tamron sent this lens to me, but it's just on loan. They don't get any input in this video. They're not paying for this video, and these opinions are my own. I will say right now, just because I'm trying to shoot everything on this lens, I don't want to take the lens off and switch it out with my other lenses because it's so cold. It is a little hard to do this on 35mm, but it does work if you can get around it a little bit, like I am right now. It's not bad. But yeah, so we'll snap a few pictures, and then we're gonna move on to the next location. So far, I'm really impressed by this lens. The images are really nice, really sharp. Not surprising considering how well Tamron's been doing with their lenses lately. It's performing well at -8, which sometimes can be a real challenge. -8, for those of you who don't know, is about -21, I don't know. Whatever it is, Celsius will be right down here. It's cold. And shooting on a day like this is where a lens like this really is nice, because you have that extra stops of light, because it goes all the way to f2.0 at the wide end at 35mm, which is what I'm shooting this on now. I mean, I'm at f9 because it's bright sunlit background and all that. But having those extra stops of light, having a lens that lets that much more light in, is really nice if you're shooting in conditions like this. 35-150 actually is a fantastic kind of, not all-in-one lens, but a really good sort of covers almost everything you want to cover, because if you're out running around and you want to have that extra reach to get into 150mm, that really does give you a lot of reach. And now it's not wide enough to do some of the other stuff I do where you get the really wide end. 24mm, 16, 17mm is a little bit better for some of those really wide angle shots. But at 35mm, you can capture some great landscape shots and some great pictures, and also some really nice portraits of people, because it has really very low distortion. Let's go see how well the autofocus system works, because Tamron's done a really good job with their VXD motors in the 70-180 and the 150-600. Curious to see how it works in this, and especially at these temperatures at -8, because it is very cold, and nothing, myself included, likes to work well at these temperatures. And something I'm very curious about, and Tamron has done a great job on their other lenses, is how much focus breathing this lens has. This will be a great spot to test the focus and the focus breathing. So I'm gonna run down there, run at the camera, see how fast it focuses, and then, yeah, we'll test the focus breathing out for manual focus too. For the focus breathing, it is almost non-existent in this lens. That was really, really an impressive performance. For the, you know, follow focus, or how well it focused on me and how quickly it focused, it was, again, really impressive how quickly it locked on me, how quickly it grabbed focus. I did have to ramp my shutter speed way up and run that at f2, because I wanted to get the most amount of, you know, that would be the most difficult for it to lock focus on, and the most difference between going from infinity to really close. And the lens performs super well. Another thing that's impressive about this lens is it's nearly parfocal. And what that basically means is you can focus on something at 35 millimeters in the wide open, keep it on a manual focus, and then zoom in, and it will keep that object or that plane basically in focus. And that doesn't happen very often, unless usually those types of lenses are very expensive, but this lens actually delivers something very close to a really good parfocal performance. Because this lens is f2.0 on the wide end, f2.8 on the long end, when you're at 150 millimeters, f2.8, but because it's f2 on the wide end, the real question I have is how well does it do in low light? Here we are, lit by the moon. Not quite a full moon, but 3/4 of a moon or so. I got the ISO set at 80,000, which, yeah, that's really high. But it is pretty cool that you can shoot with this lens in this low of light. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this all the time, but the fact that it does go all the way down to f2 is really great if you want to do some low light photography. And specifically, I'm going to try out some astrophotography and see how the stars look. Stars are a great way to challenge a lens because it really shows off how sharp or how good the lens is out in the corners, how good the chroma is, and how well the lens handles some really bright pinpoints of light. Granted, shooting astrophotography with a nearly full moon in a bright snow-lit area is not a great idea all the time, but I still think we'll be able to get something that's usable and something that looks pretty cool. It still kills me that I can film myself in the moonlight at ISO 51,000 and get a usable video. We are here. There's the moon, which is going to be a lunar eclipse. So I thought it'd be cool to film it or time-lapse it with the Tamron 35-150. So that's what we're gonna do. And it looks like the eclipse is starting. So we're gonna get this camera set up and start time-lapsing it. Time to go back to the studio and we'll break down a little bit more about what this lens is really great for and some of the things it's not so great for. But yeah, let's go back to the studio because it's freezing. This might be one of my favorite lenses that I've used so far. It's really different and really somewhat unique. The focal range, the 35-150, didn't really make sense to me when Tamron first sent it, but after using it for the last month or so, I'm really impressed by how well this lens performs and the versatility that you get being able to go from 35 to 150. Now, you know, obviously on the wide end, 24 or 20 is a little nicer for when you're doing handheld type shots or talking to the camera. So all the shots you saw, I just locked it off on a tripod and stood about 4 or 5-ish feet away, maybe 6 feet away to get those shots, but it's certainly usable. And the thing that really impressed me was the f2 aperture at the wide end, being able to use this in moonlit situations. I mean, can we just take a second and marvel at the fact that we have tools now that enable regular people like you and me to be able to record ourselves in unbelievably low light when you pair this lens with something like the A7S III or the A1 or the upcoming A7 IV, I would assume. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. So a lot of the things I had to do because this is an 82 millimeter filter thread. I didn't have any ND filters, so in the daylight situations, I had it clamped way down to like f16 or, you know, I'd ramp my shutter speed up a couple of times. But overall, this lens, the performance is just absolutely incredible. The one complaint I have about it is that the zoom ring is a little tight. It's a little stiff. So you see some extra wobbles in my footage, but other than that, the construction quality is great. The fact that you get 4 or 3 different positions of this programmable button is great. You get this customizable switch here, which you can use for 3 different settings, and then an autofocus, manual focus switch to turn it off and on. And this is where Tamron is doing something that I really hope a lot of other lens manufacturers take notice of. There's a USB-C port here, and via software that Tamron provides, you can program this lens to do a lot of different things, pretty much anything you want. So if you want the focus ring, if you don't ever use manual focus and you'd rather use this to change aperture or ISO, you can do that. You can make these buttons do pretty much whatever you want. You can make this switch kind of like put the lens in 3 different modes. So you want this to be manual focus, there you go, that's manual focus. You want it to change aperture, there you go, that's aperture. I mean, it's just
it's incredible the fact that we can program this lens to be set up the way you want. And one of my favorite things that I didn't really do a lot with, but I did test it, is the fact that you can program this focus ring to be, you know, like, what do you say, force sensitive, that it will change based on how fast you change it, or it can be linear. And in my brief testing, it was nearly perfectly linear as far as I could tell. Every single time I did it, it did it exactly the same, which is phenomenal if you do primarily video shooting and you want to be able to rack focus, but repeat your rack focus. That is crucial, having a linear focus, and Tamron's done an amazing job programming that in. The other thing about the construction of this, it is weather sealed. It's got a nice little rubber gasket there. And yeah, having it out in the elements like I did, I was really glad that it is weather sealed. Now, I've had a lot of other Tamron lenses. They've all been weather sealed, and they've all withstood some very harsh conditions and testing, sometimes where I was a little bit worried if my camera would survive or not, but they all have done really well. So Tamron's constructed an excellent lens. It is heavy. It definitely is a heavy lens. It's much heavier than the other Tamron lenses, but what you get out of this with the optics, which are just incredible, and we'll jump into that here in a second, I think makes it worth it. And on the optics, I mean, frankly, blown away. I couldn't believe how sharp this thing is, wide open at f2, shooting. I mean, it just is sharp all the way out in the corners, the very edges. And the one thing that, if you see these photos here, these are some of the stills I pulled from the astrophotography time lapses that I did. The one thing that really impressed me was how well it handled the stars. A lot of times a lens will smear stars, or they'll get big long streaks or tails on them because of the way the optics work out on the edges. But this is very clean, very nice, very usable images for stars, which are, I mean, just, it really shocked me. And that's at f2. Normally you want to stop down a lens, stop or so, just to get a little bit better performance, but I really wanted to push this, so I left it at f2, and the result is just, in my opinion, nothing short of incredible. The biggest downside of this lens is the price. It's $1,899 US, so that's much more expensive than most Tamron lenses, that at least the ones that I own. But the performance, the value that you get from this lens, I think makes it well worth it, because this lens competes with lenses that cost significantly more. And yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out how to sell some stuff so that I can purchase one of these for myself, because I can see this lens easily replacing my 28-75 and my 70-180 in most situations that I shoot. It just absolutely phenomenal performance out of a lens like this. I really didn't know what to make of it when I first got it. When Tamron first sent it to me, I wasn't sure what to do with this lens. And then after going out and shooting with it, I really, really enjoyed shooting with this focal range that's built into this lens. So yeah, gonna have to figure out to sell something. If you're interested in other lenses that work really well for Sony cameras, a lot of them are Tamron lenses because I shoot with a lot of Tamron lenses. Click or tap right there, put together a small playlist. If you have questions, ask me in the comments below, or you can join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you again soon in the next video, and hopefully maybe I'll be a little warmer.